Hi, I'm Kevin Werbach, Professor of Legal Studies and Business Ethics at the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania. For decades, I've studied emerging technologies, from broadband to blockchain. Today, AI is promising to transform our world. But AI needs accountability, mechanisms to ensure it's developed and deployed in responsible, safe, and trustworthy ways. On this podcast, I speak with the experts leading the charge for accountable AI. Karen Hao has long been, to my mind, one of the best, if not the best, journalists writing about AI for publications including The Atlantic, The Wall Street Journal, and MIT Tech Review. She has a new book out called Empire of AI, Dreams and Nightmares in Sam Altman's OpenAI, in which she makes the argument that the direction that OpenAI represents of massive expansion of resources, financial, physical, intellectual capital, that are going into AI systems represents a danger in many ways to our society, our democracy, and what it means for our economy. In our conversation, we talk about what are the ideas that animate OpenAI and what are the implications of the direction for AI that it represents. You won't want to miss this conversation with Karen Hao. Karen, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
We're going to talk about your new book, Empire of AI, but you have been reporting on AI for many years before that, before really there was an open AI. And so I wanted to start by asking you, just looking at the sweep of the time you've been in this space, has our understanding of the broad kinds of ethical and societal challenges of AI evolved?
Yeah, I think it really has, in the sense that in the kind of last 7 years that I've been covering this technology, it has really changed its form. So when I first started covering AI research, it was primarily smaller machine learning and deep learning models and other types of um, AI systems that were put not even in the realm of machine learning, that were like just using older fashioned techniques. And in the last few years, especially the last 2 years since ChatGPT, basically, there's just been an astronomical acceleration in the size and scale of the deep learning models that are being developed for generative AI applications like ChatGPT, Perplexity, Claude, Gemini. And I think that brings a whole host of new ethical and societal challenges, in the sense that whereas before we already had certain challenges like data privacy, certain challenges like just general like surveillance capabilities being a big concern. Now we also have to contend with other kinds of concerns that just come from the sheer scale of these models. So the environmental impact has dramatically exploded. There's also data privacy issues have accelerated. Now we have intellectual property and copyright issues that we're dealing with. And also, there is, because these technologies now have a more consumer facing and engaging interface, there's obviously a much wider range of people that are using these technologies and might not necessarily have the full context around what these technologies can and can't do. And so there's a lot more additional harms now from people using these technologies in ways that they think they can, but actually are not, they're not well equipped for, like searching for medical information, for example. Like these models just are not equipped to be factual 100% of the time. So in particularly sensitive contexts and in life death situation contexts, like, you should not, absolutely not be using these tools. And so I think that's kind of the evolution of AI ethics, with the acceleration of AI development in the direction that we are seeing today.
But if we just take some of the issues that were around before, like data privacy, algorithmic bias, and so forth, there are more tools now and techniques for addressing those problems than there were 6 or 7 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So do you think organizations are in better shape, or are those issues still really things that we need to be concerned about?
When you say organizations, you mean like the organizations developing the technologies, or like companies that are adopting the technologies?
Yeah, that's an important distinction. So I guess I'm curious on both sides, and if you would answer differently for the development labs and the deployers.
Yeah, so I think the developers of the technologies, even though there are techniques that are, we have like privacy preserving machine learning, federated learning, these types of techniques have been developed, they are not being used at all.
Mm-hmm.
So the kind of core issues that used to be there that have just accelerated with this new paradigm of generative AI has not been ameliorated in any such way with the developers of these tools. With the tool adopters, I guess you could say that maybe some companies, because they were previously using earlier generations of machine learning and deep learning technologies, they might have already developed some kind of capability to just experiment with and mitigate the risks of different
Mm-hmm.
types of AI tools. So hopefully they were able to translate some of those learnings from the previous era into the current one. But I think a lot of the core ethical challenges are also with just like the development of the technologies themselves. And so there's once the tool has already left the developer's hands and kind of gone into the hands of the adopters, like there's kind of um, things that no matter what the adopters do, like the privacy infringement has already happened because
Mm-hmm.
developers have already used data without the consent of people to train their models. So it's kind of like a problem a responsibility I think that ultimately falls in the hands of the model developers.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so your new book focuses on OpenAI. And the first question is, why just tell the story of one company? Is this really representative of this larger development of AI?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, so yes, I think it's absolutely in order to understand how we got to where we are today
Mm-hmm.
with just wide scale AI adoption and development and this kind of race that we're seeing to
Mm-hmm.
just develop bigger and faster models, you really do have to understand the story of OpenAI because OpenAI was the one that decided a lot of key things that ultimately have defined and shaped what generative AI is today. OpenAI was the first company to essentially decide we are going to scale these deep learning models to a degree that has never been seen before to see what happens. And at the time, like they went from, like the largest deep learning models at the time were being trained on, at most a few dozen computer chips, GPUs. And OpenAI decided to do a training run on 10,000 chips, GPUs. So they exploded the order of magnitude for the amount of computational resources that were going into training a single model dramatically, right? And it was only after they did that that the rest of the industry followed and
Mm-hmm.
suddenly gave birth to this phenomenon that we see now known as generative AI. Um, and so I wanted to, it was almost like I wanted to kind of like tell the story of OpenAI to tell the history of generative AI because
Mm-hmm.
so many of the early moments of the generative AI paradigm happened within the company.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I wanted to focus on the company because it is such a great case study as well of how technology development works and how AI development works, in that it was set up as a nonprofit originally, and now we've sort of seen it evolve into this really strange Frankenstein corporate structure that, just the other day, OpenAI has declared will stay a nonprofit with a for-profit nested within it. But originally, OpenAI was set up in these like weird ways because they were trying to ultimately answer this question of how do we govern an extremely consequential technology, and they were trying to innovate with corporate governance structures as a experiment in answering this question. And I think that kind of like the progression of the company has basically definitively answered, at least from my reporting and my perspective,
Yeah.
that um, the governance of AI, first of all, is extremely consequential and very important, and also cannot just be done within Silicon Valley with like strange bespoke corporate governance structures. This is clearly like a whole of society governance challenge, and everyone, whether you're a voter or someone sitting on your school board or like a patient in your doctor's office or a policymaker at the federal level, like everyone has sort of a stake in deciding how AI should be developed and how it should be
Hmm.
adopted and deployed. And so it's also a case study in that, and just like showing how the development of this technology is just the product of so many different
Hmm.
human choices, and ultimately those choices get made by the people who get to sit at the table, the people who are in the room where it happens. And if we don't widen that room, we are going to end up with technologies that really do not serve the broader public, but rather just serve a small handful of people.
Yeah, and you've known many of these key characters for a long time, and had tremendous access, and I believe over 100 interviews for this book. Um, so was it inevitable, the trajectory that OpenAI went on, or was it that maybe if Google or Microsoft or someone else had been the one that decided to take those steps on scaling generative AI, we would have been in a different place?
I don't think it at all was inevitable. And in fact, through the course of reporting on the book, I concluded that OpenAI was essentially the only organization that could
Hmm.
have ever brought us to this specific
Hmm.
place. And there's a couple reasons for that. So, like, OpenAI themselves have always used this argument that the industry was on a broader trajectory for scaling these models. And if the US didn't scale fast enough, then like China would have as well. But if you look at the Chinese AI industry, the way that just the tech industry works in general, there's just no circumstance under which someone in China would give a tech company $10 billion with like no articulated vision of what that is going to be for. That's something that can only happen really in the Silicon Valley ecosystem, where like that level of money can be thrown around without
Hmm.
necessarily having a plan. But even then, like even within the Silicon Valley ecosystem, the like that's still kind of that insane. It's like still really crazy that someone
Yeah.
did that. And the reason why it was able to happen within OpenAI specifically is because there were a particular set of ideologies of the founders that came together
Hmm.
that really kind of had like extreme conviction around this idea that scaling is somehow going to lead to the replication of human intelligence and then lead to super intelligence, like some kind of
Yeah.
entity that will exceed human intelligence. And because that conviction was so strong, they made this kind of ridiculous bet. And on top of that, they had Sam Altman as like a fundraising asset. Sam Altman is a once in a generation talent for fundraising and convincing people to
Mm.
just seed massive amounts of capital to him and his ventures. And so it was really the concoction of like these very
Hmm.
specific ingredients that led to what we see today. And it was only after OpenAI demonstrated some kind of technical viability and
Hmm.
started teasing a sense that there might be commercial viability. It was only then that then all of the companies in the US and China started following in
Okay.
its footsteps. Um, and so, yeah, it was like the exact opposite of inevitable in the sense that it
Hmm.
literally could have only emerged from the one place that it did.
What exactly are those ideologies?
So I think there's like it's what I would describe as kind of like pseudo-religious movements that are happening within the AI world and within Silicon Valley. Um, One of the ideologies is that first, well, I guess there's a broader ideology here, which is that like it is even possible to replicate human intelligence within
Hmm.
software and within computers, and this is something that dates back to the founding of the AI field itself. And that when the AI field was founded in the 1950s, that was sort of a hypothesis that scientists had, and that's why they came together to define this new field called artificial intelligence. And that's like not, that's not something that is it's not proven. It's like not, you can't
Hmm.
like we don't have any way to ascertain whether or not this is possible. It truly is a belief that maybe this is possible. And it kind of stems from this broader belief within Silicon Valley that like everything in the world is computable.
Hmm.
So if everything is computable, then human intelligence must be computable. So if we throw enough computational resources at replicating the thing, we will eventually succeed. I think within this broader umbrella ideology, there are kind of two subsets that have emerged. One is that if we do this, we will get to utopia, and the other one is if we do this, we will destroy all of humanity. And to me, it's kind of like I say in the book, like you kind of want to understand these as two different interpretations of the same Bible. Like
Hmm.
they both believe in the religion of AGI, but one is like warning about what happens when you do bad things, you go to hell. The other one's saying like, oh, look at all these amazing, incredible visions of heaven that we might arrive to. But they're like kind of reading from the same text.
Hmm.
And I think both of these were encapsulated within OpenAI when they first started. There were people that were more doomer oriented. There were people that were more boomer oriented, to kind of use the colloquial terms that have been adopted in Silicon Valley today. And so like each of these different factions within OpenAI kind of in their own way kind of ushered in this generative AI paradigm because of like their different types of thinking.
Hmm.
Um, so like both of them agreed we need to scale this thing to just see if we can reach AGI. But in on one side, the argument for scaling was we need to scale as fast as possible so that we can beat out like potential AGI developers that are bad, that we do not want to have AGI. So let's just go for the 10,000 computer chips. And then we can use our lead time to study this thing and like really figure out how to perfect it, and then usher in, you know, like a more ethical AGI into the world. And the other one was like, yeah, let's scale this thing and then let's just release it.
Hmm.
And so both of them kind of were like, let's scale this thing. And then there were actually lots of fight throughout OpenAI's history. There have been lots and lots of fights
Yeah.
internally between these two factions about, do we release it now? Do we release it later? But essentially what happened was they did the scaling, and then the people who said, let's release it faster won over. And that's kind of how we ended up where we are today.
Yeah. So was the outcome inevitable once ChatGPT was released to the world, that essentially the accelerationist side was going to win?
I still don't think so. I don't ever believe anything is inevitable. I
Mm.
think if we did, we would have a serious problem with um, the functioning of democracy, because that
Hmm.
means no one has agency, and democracy
Mm.
only works when everyone has
Mm.
agency and believes that they have agency to shape how they want to collectively move forward in the
Mm.
future. And so, was it highly likely that ChatGPT would set off this race? Absolutely. Like they created this extremely compelling technology that lit the world on fire. Of course, every company is going to want like a piece of that.
Mm.
But are there still plenty of things that we can do now to make sure that ultimately this technology is beneficial? Yes. And
Mm.
like and the reason I say that first is because I don't think the technology is beneficial broadly to a broad base of people right now. I think there are lots of different harms in the development of the technology that are leading to vulnerable and marginalized communities around the world being very harmed by the development and deployment of the tools. But also, like, there's a lot of work to be done to kind of
Mm.
continue to massage and um, contain the development and deployment of these technologies in a way that ultimately more people, and hopefully most people, and hopefully all
Mm.
people can
Mm.
get benefit.
You mentioned some of these concerns at the beginning, but what should we be most worried about right now in terms of negative consequences of where we are with OpenAI and other generative AI labs?
Yeah, so I think the two biggest for me are, when you're thinking about the supply chain of AI development, like the two
Mhm.
biggest ingredients are data and computational resources.
Mhm.
And from a data perspective, I'm extremely concerned about the degree to which there seems to be a willingness within global governments right now to just interpret copyright laws such that these AI companies can just continue to train on whatever intellectual property they want. And I'm quite concerned about that because that I think that particular kind of interpretation would be really devastating to a lot of industries, to a lot of media, both entertainment and like artists and also journalists, because if our work can be taken to create models that ultimately uh, corporate executives can then use to justify the laying off of workers, like the economic value of our work heavily depreciates, and then it becomes much more difficult to do high quality journalism or create high quality
Mhm.
art. And I think we're already seeing some effects of that with just like the general decline of information quality all across the web. I think the second thing that has me very concerned is the environmental impact, because the size of the data centers that are being developed right now, the size of the supercomputers that are being developed right now to support the training of new models, is just of a scale that I don't think the general public has fully gained an appreciation of. Like earlier this year, President Trump announced the Stargate Initiative, which is this $500 billion private investment into computing infrastructure that OpenAI says is all for OpenAI. And $500 billion is an extraordinary amount of money. And to put that
Yeah.
into context, like the cost of the Apollo program to send the first man to the moon was around 300 billion 2025 dollars over the course of 13 years. And
Mhm.
the Stargate Initiative is supposed to be 500 billion over 4 years. So this is like an order of magnitude more than the space program. And the size of each individual one of these data centers and supercomputers, um, they are no like they're the size of like Ivy League campuses. They are these absolutely massive buildings that are like, you can't even use football fields to describe them because it's actually like hundreds of football fields in
Mhm.
size. And they use their power demands are starting to match the level of cities. Like the original mock-up that OpenAI had for the Stargate Initiative, like predating when Trump announced it. So I don't know how it's updated now, but the original mock-up suggested that one facility would use 5 gigawatts of power, which is the amount of New York City's power draw.
Mhm. Wow.
And so this is, yeah, just an unprecedented, like these are mind-boggling numbers. And I think one of the things that I've sort of noticed with OpenAI's strategy and with Sam Altman in particular, like he picks values that are so astronomically large that it stuns people into not really understanding it anymore
Mhm.
because it's beyond comprehension. And so, yeah, so I think those are the two biggest issues that I see that are sort of urgently need to be addressed.
The argument the companies make is back to China. Maybe it wasn't inevitable that China would have gotten there originally, but now the genie's out of the bottle, and China is trying to be the winner, and China will devote those resources if it has a point to building those massive data centers. So why is that not a good argument that someone is going to do this, and it should be an American company?
So I think OpenAI just had when they were announcing their like latest
Mm.
corporate restructuring, they hit on this point that they've been hitting on for a while now under the Trump administration. We need to develop AI because it'll be democratic AI. If we let China develop it, it'll be authoritarian AI. And this is absolutely a red herring, because if whatever AI OpenAI develops is also authoritarian AI. Like there's no democratic governance in this AI development that OpenAI is doing at all. They are calling the shots, they are making the decisions, and they're deploying these things like far beyond just, the US and US voting population to all parts of the world that have absolutely even less say than like the typical American in the development of these technologies. And we have seen Silicon Valley use this argument over and over and over again, like we cannot have authoritarian AI, therefore trust us. But like ultimately, what has happened is now the US still does not have any federal data privacy law because of this argument. Still, there's like not a, there's, we do not have strong like intellectual property protections in this new like regime where AI companies are lobbying incredibly heavily to try and erode those away. So basically, they're like encroaching increasingly on Americans' rights under this justification. And at the end of the day, like China's still developing these technologies, even with all of the massive effort that US companies and the US government has tried to do to contain the development of that. So we've ended up in a world where basically China is continuing to do the things that it is able to do, but now Americans have no rights. And that's like, that's essentially like what this argument has gotten us.
So, as I said, you've talked to many of these people and known many of them for a long time. What is it you think that someone who just reads these stories and these announcements and sees Sam Altman testify, what do you think you understand better about this company that someone who doesn't have that access that you had would be surprised about?
When people use technologies, there's sort of an automation bias. If you think that the technology is neutral, you think that it comes from people that are just smarter than you and have like more technical skills than you, and therefore they're going to supply these like neutral technologies to you. And like technology is not neutral. It doesn't come from. It's not developed by neutral people. The people who develop these technologies have very explicit worldviews that are baked into the way that these technologies are made. So, for example, a lot of Silicon Valley is starting like at the highest levels of Silicon Valley. I don't want to talk necessarily about like the workers, the tech workers, but like the people who lead Silicon Valley and hold the capital are increasingly becoming very enamored with this idea of a post-democracy world order. And there's this phrase that I think people have started using called the politics of exit, where they are enamored with intellectuals, quote unquote, that are describing why like democracy doesn't work anymore and we need to move to something else. And they have these ideas like the network state, which is about like ultimately organizing people in a different way than nation states, but rather organizing people where essentially you just have like a bunch of companies that are run by CEOs that are kind of like that's how you organize society. And I think this is something that like really needs to be understood with why AI development has become the way that it is right now. Like essentially what OpenAI and the rest of these Silicon Valley companies are saying is we will bring you modernity, progress, unfathomable positive transformation as long as you give us everything. Give us all of your data, give us all of your labor, give us all of like your land, your energy and your water to power our supercomputers. And on the other end of this like complete capitulation of resources, we give you utopia. And what's actually happening is we're just giving them all of our resources for like an ambiguous purpose. And so it's essentially this massive resource and capital consolidation scheme. And that is, uncannily aligned with the worldview of many of these people now, where they want to move away from a democracy. They want to move towards these resource consolidated hierarchical structures. Yeah, so I think that's like the biggest thing that having studied, like, I went to school with these people, I like worked alongside these people, and now I report about these people. Like, that is a thing that I think is not the most visible
Mhm.
sometimes to
Mhm.
um, the broader public.
You mentioned a couple times that you think nothing is inevitable. So, what does an alternate trajectory look like?
So I think, first of all, like, I guess there's multiple ways to answer this question. Like, what does an alternate AI trajectory look like?
An
There are many
alternate
ways.
future that doesn't have this consolidation and transference of power that you described.
Yeah, an alternate trajectory. I guess just like going back to democracy. Um, but yeah, so I guess the way that, like, I would see that happening, first of all, like, we still want the benefits of AI. It's just what I'm not arguing that like we just get rid of all AI technologies together. What I'm arguing is that we want to move away from the AI paradigm that requires colossal resources and ambiguous benefit on the other side. And we want to move towards what we were already doing before, which is smaller, task specific, well scoped AI systems that are designed to tackle very specific problems in environment, healthcare, education, and other types of applications that we really want. Not only does that start moving us away from like the data privacy issues and the copyright issues and the environmental issues, but also, like, I think it just gets us better systems, because part of the issue with trying to define an AI system that can do anything or anyone can use to do anything is that you're never going to get a system that can do everything. And so people are just going to end up using a faulty system to do things that might end up harming them. Whereas if you have very specific tools that it's like, you will use this just for this specific type of cancer detection, it becomes a lot easier for people to use the tool correctly, and not to use it outside of the scope that it was intended and designed for. And I think the way to kind of shift towards that is, first, we need more regulation. We need more legislation to actually constrain the amount of data that these companies are allowed to amass, the amount of land that these companies are allowed to buy up. We need more transparency in what type of data they feed into these models, and how the deals around these data centers happen, because a lot of these data center deals actually happen under shell companies, where communities can't even react, and kind of like start the democratic process of potentially pushing back if they don't want the data center, because the deals happen behind closed doors and in secrecy. We need more transparency about the actual like environmental cost of these models, because the companies themselves have not released enough information to actually quantify that. And people who use these tools, I think, can vote with their feet about which tools they actually want to incorporate into their lives, and whatever organizations, whether it's schools or workplaces or community committees that they're part of, like, they should be actively having conversations about, do we want to enable the adoption of AI in this particular community, and under what guardrails should we do so? And if we can have all of this happening at once, I think that can help slowly put enough pressure on these companies, both bottoms up and top down, to actually change the way that they develop these technologies, and hopefully also level the playing field, so that like more startups can enter this space, and more AI developers of different stripes can enter this space and iterate and refine and develop better technologies.
Karen, thank you so much for your time. The book is Empire of AI. Really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you.
Thank you so much, Kevin.
This has been The Road to Accountable AI. If you like what you're hearing, please give us a good review and check out my Substack for more insights on AI accountability. Thank you for listening.
This is Kevin Werbach. If you want to go deeper on AI governance, trust, and responsibility with me and other distinguished faculty of the world's top business school, Sign up for the next cohort of Wharton's Strategies for Accountable AI online executive education program, featuring live interaction with faculty, expert interviews, and custom-designed asynchronous content. Join fellow business leaders to learn valuable skills you can put to work in your organization. Visit execed.wharton.upenn.edu/ACAI for full details. I hope to see you there.